Miguna Miguna, Kenyan democracy activist and lawyer, frequently at the center of Kenya's modern political turmoil. In 2017, he swore in Raila Odinga as the people's president. The mock ceremony followed contested elections that Miguna says were stolen by Uhuru Kenyatta. Miguna was soon after exiled to Canada. His supporters took to the streets.
We are dying with Miguna! Yeah!
In 2022, he returned under a new political administration. The man he once supported, Odinga, is now an arch-rival. Back in Nairobi, and with some harsh words for Odinga, self-proclaimed five-star general Miguna Miguna speaks to the InnerView. And Miguna Miguna joins us now on the InnerView, coming to us from Nairobi, Kenya. It's been a while. Good to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thank you.
You were outside of the country the last time you and I spoke. You're back in Kenya. Are you content? Are you happy?
That's a difficult question. I was out of the country because I was forced out of the country for nearly 5 years. And then eventually the people who forced me out of the country are out of power and I'm back home. To that extent, yes, I am happy. Am I happy that they sent me out of the country? Of course not. Am I happy that they have not faced justice for the crimes they committed against me? Of course not. And against Kenyans? Of course not. So it's yes and no.
Back then you said that you were waging the mother of all liberation wars. Does that war still need to be waged now that you're back in the country?
Against the merchants of impunity, the ones that conspired to force me out of the country, the forces of retrogression, the people that have captured this country and enslaved Kenyans for the last 60 years and made sure that the wealth of a nation is in the hands of less than 100 people, mostly men.
How much has changed at the ballot box, given that there is a new government? President Rutto's government allowed you back into the country, is not actively persecuting you as far as I can see. So has there been any positive change?
Why would they be persecuting me and we fought on the same side against the oligarchs?
Right.
I mean, they turned on Ruto. You know very well that the last 4 years, they turned Ruto into a boogeyman. And they have been beating on him since then. And they tried to stop him from being president. So in a way, we ended up on the same side.
Right.
So why would Ruto be persecuting me when I help him become president?
Right. Well, the point I'm making is that if he's at the wheel and you have positive feelings about this government, why does this liberation war still need to be waged? Why do you still have to be the five-star general of the National Revolutionary Movement? Isn't the country in good hands? Because
the war for social justice, the war for justice, the war for transformation is not a war against individuals. It's a war against a system, a systemic, systematic, entrenched system, a neocolonial system, a system the imperial former colonial powers put in place to serve foreign interests. These have just been their lackeys. So yes, Ruto is president today, but that's an individual. UDA is just a party. You do not change a system of enslavement because of a change in regime. It is too deeply entrenched to be changed in 1 day or 1 month or 1 year by one regime, if that regime is interested and committed to transformation. So I'm committed to the transformation of this country, to the overhaul of the neocolonial structures that have kept the Africans, Kenyan Africans, in enslavement for 60 years. That's a different question altogether.
The former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is asking his supporters to take to the streets to protest against this government and to call for change. Your thoughts on that?
That's a cynical, hypocritical conmanship that Raila Odinga has practiced on the Kenyan people for the last 45 years. Raila Odinga is not committed to change. He's not committed to transformation. He's not a progressive intellectual or leader. That is why in the last 4 years, the last 5 years, Raila Odinga was in bed with Uhuru Kenyatta, who was a tyrant, who terrorized the Kenyan people, who looted and plundered the Kenyan economy. And he was cheering. Raila Odinga cheered when I was being persecuted, when I was tortured, sedated, and forcefully removed from Kenya twice. He said that if he were to become president, he would pursue and continue these tyrannical policies and activities of Uhuru Kenyatta. So when he says he's leading protests for himself. This is a selfish man who is only interested in his own stomach and that of his cronies. There is absolutely no way that this protest could lead to anything better for Kenyans. When the cost of living was at its highest, Uhuru Kenyatta was president and Raila Odinga was supporting him. If Raila Odinga had stayed on course, like I wanted him to, in 2017, 2018, he would be president now, and Ruto would be in opposition. But he betrayed me, and he betrayed Kenyans. And he thought that the shortcut to power was to betray Kenyans and to ask Uhuru Kenyatta to rig elections in his favor, which Uhuru Kenyatta had rigged in Uhuru's favor in 2013.
Right.
Well, unfortunately for him, history is not very kind to hypocrites like him.
Yeah, when you talk about history, because you were against Raila, then you were for him, and then of course you paid the price for being for him when you swore him in, and then you were not allowed back into the country, and you suffered as a consequence, and as you say, he turned his back on you. It's a very personal relationship. It's almost Shakespearean.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's just that people like you don't understand what it is.
Educate me, tell me.
I was never for or against Raila.
You swore
Let
him
me
in.
educate you a little bit.
You swore him in at his ceremony.
No, just listen. No, that's being simplistic. I was never for or against Raila.
You were next to him.
I was for a fully...
You were next to him when they said he lost the election, and you said no. Sure. But okay, to clarify, the reason I say you were for him is because...
So can I answer the question? Sure. Can I answer your question?
I'm going to finish the question.
My friend, don't answer your question.
Sure. Okay, so to clarify the question and then to give you the opportunity, right? So from the outside, when we saw you swearing him in when others said that he didn't win the election, and you swore him in to say he is the legitimate leader, from our perspective, it looks like you were for him. And then you had a falling out, and as you say, you felt betrayed. Continue.
No, because you are not intellectually clear. Let me explain to you so that you remain focused intellectually.
I'm focused. Tell me.
Raila Odinga and I met in the battlefield for democracy for this country, when this country was a one-party dictatorship. Raila was older than me, I was a teenager. But we believed in the same vision, the same end game. Total democracy, rule of law, respect for human rights, and constitutionalism. Then Raila Odinga was with me in 2007 when elections were rigged against him. I became his advisor. We led the struggle for the enactment of a new constitution. Then Raila joined the government as a prime minister. Then he became corrupt, and we disagreed because he was corrupt, and I was not. So it is not me who left Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga left me in the struggle, became corrupt when he became prime minister, and I told him not to. Had he listened to me, he would be president today. Then in 2017, They rigged Raila Odinga out. I was in that election as a gubernatorial candidate. I didn't like what happened, and I joined him again in the struggle for electoral justice. Raila abandoned me again and went and joined the people that rigged him out. I remained resistant against those people. So who betrayed who? He betrayed me, because had he remained with me, he would be president today. But no, Raila Odinga is a coward. He did not stay the course. He was too cowardly, went and knelt down before the same person who had taken power from him illegitimately and started cheering him. And then what happened? He said, no, all I want is the state, the deep state, to help me steal like they stole. And I told him that's not the way to power. The way to power is through the ballot. The person who gets the majority votes wins. And so Raila lost. He lost because he's a coward. He lost because he betrayed me and others. So I never left him. I am the only one who has remained exactly where I was in 1987. I have never changed. My views on democracy have not changed. My views about the rule of law have not changed. My views about constitutionalism has not changed. But Raila has been back and forth. He even joined KANU and became Secretary General of KANU. We were all fighting against KANU. He joined Kibaki. Then he's joined everybody, because all he wants is money. He wants money and comfort for himself and his family. And that's not my ambition.
At the beginning, you called him a con man. Do you feel that during that process, he conned you?
He was a con man who had won an election. So I swore in a con man who had won an election, because I believed that if Kenyans decide to elect a con man, who am I to decide against that? So if today a thief is elected popularly to be president, I will support that thief to be president, because that's what the Kenyans have elected. But that doesn't mean I support conmanship or thievery, for that matter. So yes, he conned me, he conned Kenyans, but in 2017 and 2007, he actually won an election. And that's why I supported him. I've not changed my mind about that. I'm very clear that Raila won those elections. And that's why I supported him, because I would support the person who wins an election. Just like now, Ruto won the 2022 election. Raila is now becoming silly by saying that he does not recognize a president that was elected by the people. Yet going into that election, Raila said that he respects the IBC, he believes and trusts Chebukati, and he would accept the results even if he loses. He went to the Supreme Court. The unanimous decision of the court was that Raila lost and Ruto won. I think the decent thing right now is for Raila to let Ruto govern for 5 years. If he will be alive in 2027, let him contest again if he wants. And if he wins, we will clap and say, hooray. Let him govern also if that is what the Kenyans want. And if he is dead, well, then history shall judge him.
To the point of Ruto governing, objectively, things don't seem to be too rosy on some fronts right now. So with the cost of living crisis, with the fact that for the first time since independence, the government has struggled to pay some civil servants their salaries, isn't that Ruto's problem, and isn't his government to blame for that?
No, I disagree, because number one, the cost of living was already astronomically high by the time Uhuru left power. The cost of living in Kenya, the commodity prices, the starvation, the unemployment, the high unemployment, the suffering, the general suffering, was caused by Uhuru Kenyatta, by his plunder, by his misrule, by the excesses of his regime. He confessed himself to the public that his administration, people in his administration, was stealing 2 billion Kenya shillings every day. He never had those people arrested or prosecuted or jailed. He never repatriated those funds back to Kenya or for use by the public. The Pandora Papers, which was an investigative report by investigative journalists, consortium globally, produced a report that Uhuru Kenyatta and his family have looted and stashed trillions of Kenya shillings abroad in offshore accounts. He said he would address the country 90 days after he would have come from a trip abroad. He never did. We have not seen the money. So you cannot blame Ruto for that. Uhuru Kenyatta was the president for 10 years. So when Ruto takes power, and it's not even 1 year, he found himself in a hole, which Uhuru Kenyatta dug. So to dig yourself out of that hole would need time, would need a concerted effort, would need pragmatic policies and actions that hopefully is putting in place. So really, there is no government in the world that can find itself in this kind of recession, and then you expect mystically or mysteriously that they would be able to come out of it overnight.
Okay.
When there was deep recession in the United States, Roosevelt took time to come out of that recession through practical, pragmatic economic policies.
Okay.
And I have hope that this administration will do better. If they don't do anything to get out of this hole, then of course Kenyans will judge them harshly.
Yeah, it sounds as if you are hopeful and you're willing to give them time. I want to rewind a little bit, rewind the decades a bit, because I want to get to the origins of your activism. I read that as a teenager, you were arrested for political activism during the regime of Daniel Arap Moi. Would you say that's what shaped you? I mean, you left for Tanzania, if I'm not mistaken, very soon afterwards. Was that the origin story, the political origin story of Miguna Miguna?
No, you have to rewind a little bit further. I was actually shaped politically, ideologically in my village when I was a kid by the struggles of my own mother. So it goes much, much further when I was much, much younger. My father happened to have died before I was born. And so a single mother raised me. We were 7 kids, and she struggled, and I saw poverty all around me. That is when my political ideology and philosophy crystallized. And of course, as I read more and went to high school and eventually to university, it became more apparent as to what the problem was. So by the time I was joining the University of Nairobi, my philosophy, my ideology, my political orientation was already completely formed. And I knew who the enemy was. And I joined the struggle knowing where I stood vis-a-vis that enemy. And that's what I've been pursuing ever since. So yes, by the time Moi cracked down, not just on me, but the entire leadership of the University Nairobi student organization, and detained us without trial, tortured us, and then expelled us from the university, my political activism had already been crystallized.
And then
Yes.
fast forwarding to your time in Canada for those 5 years or so when you were on the outside, were there times when you felt that this might be forever, that you might have to actually live in exile? Talk me through some of those emotions.
No, actually, if you remember, immediately I was forced into exile in Canada. Your channel interviewed me a number of times, and the first interview I did when I was in Toronto, I said, and I think people thought I was being over-exuberant, I said, we shall triumph, that this is a temporary setback, that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga would not succeed, that Kenyans would defeat them. And you asked me, are you sure? And I said, I'm as sure as hell. So no, I never lost hope. Not for a second did I think that I would die in exile. That's why I said, in the outside chance that I was wrong, in the outside chance that Uhuru managed to impose Raila Odinga as president, I would not come back. I would have died in exile. Because there was absolutely no way that I was going to come back to that tyrannical system and accept it. If I was going to come back when they were in power, I would come back guns blazing and just fight them like you would fight an enemy in any situation.
Did you change your perspective on anything while you were in Toronto from the outside looking in?
No. The only thing that changed is that I found myself on the same side as William Ruto. Ideologically, politically, Ruto has never been on my side. I have never been on Ruto's side. But we found ourselves on the same side because my enemies turned to be his enemies, who are all his longtime friends. When Ruto was at the university, I was a student leader and he was in the Christian Union. And he didn't know politics, leave alone radical politics. And throughout his life, he's been a conservative, and I am not a conservative. So we've had very different political positions. But then came Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, came into bed, and Raila Odinga turned upside down everything that we've ever believed in. So instead of being progressive, Raila Odinga became more right-wing than William Ruto. Raila Odinga supported excesses that we have opposed throughout our lives. So I looked at the political panorama and I realized the only person who can defeat these people as I'm abroad is William Ruto. He had the commitment, he had the focus, he had the stamina, he had the organizational acumen, he had the party, and he had the hunger for power. And I knew this was the only way. I could not support Raila Odinga, and the rest who were competing with William Ruto were jokers. So the only way to defeat Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta was to work with William Ruto, and that's exactly what I did. I'm a pragmatic political animal.
A pragmatic political animal. For those people who are taking to the streets at the behest of Raila Odinga, who are supporting Raila Odinga, of course, taking to the streets is not something that you would normally oppose. It's something you called for in your personal capacity as well previously. When they go out into the streets demanding change, when they point to the cost of living crisis, when they point to the unpaid salaries, when they point to the fact that they feel things are not working out for them in their country, your message to those protesters is what?
You see, if these protesters were led by genuine revolutionary or progressive leaders, I would have joined them. I would have supported them. If their protest was strictly against the standard of living, the high unemployment, the police brutality or extrajudicial killings, I would be for them. But that's not what they are. These protests were called by Raila Odinga after 8 months of hiding, or after having accepted the results of the election, for personal reasons, so that he can have a handshake, so that he can join this government from the back door. So it isn't what he's saying. You know, if these protests were because of high standard of living, then he should have led them for the last 5 years when Uhuru was president. But he didn't. In fact, he defended the high cost of living. He gave Ukraine as the excuse, then he gave world economic crisis as the excuse. He's given every bad excuse for misgovernance and plunder. So what I'm saying is this: they are wrong-headed, they are founded on mischief and lies, and as a result, I cannot support them. And they are led by hypocrites. They are led, Martha Karua is one of those people that stole Raila's election in 2007 and thumbed her nose and told Raila to go to court instead of calling for protest. At that time, I was protesting. In 2017, 2018, when I led the national resistance movement, Martha Karua was not in it. Kalonzo Musyoka was not in it. Jeremiah Kioni was supporting electoral theft and injustice. Wamalo was a minister in that election, in that government that stole the election. All these renegades that Raila now surrounds himself with are the same people that caused the problem that they are purportedly complaining about. Then come to the people who are demonstrating.
But aren't they also
Almost
just being
99.9%
aren't they
of
just
them,
being pragmatic political animals as well? Those people, aren't they just being pragmatic political animals?
Let me say this.
Sure.
I'm going to answer that question, but let me say this. The people that are demonstrating is not Martha Karua, is not Raila, is not Wamalo and the rest. 99.9% of the youth on the street are unemployed. They don't have a job. They don't have an income. So they have lived like this throughout. Many of them are graduates who have never had a job. But Raila has been in power. All these people around Raila have been in power. They are all billionaires. What have they done for the youth? The youth are being killed on the street. Yesterday, Raila, Martha Karua, and the rest did not even join them because they said their security have been withdrawn. So they want the same regime that they are campaigning to remove to provide them with security.
Miguna,
now, coming to pragmatism.
We're running out of time, so if you could do this briefly. Thank you.
I am doing this briefly.
Thank you.
No, they are not pragmatic political animals. They are hypocrites because they have not stood on the side of Kenyans throughout their lives. They have used Kenyans as pawns for their selfish gains. And that is very different from me.
In the last 45 seconds before I thank you and have to say goodbye, you said to your 2.4 million Twitter followers that you were not going to subscribe to Twitter Blue. You didn't care about the blue tick, but I still see you have the blue tick. Have you subscribed? Changed your mind? What's up with that?
No, I did subscribe. Like your former host, Mehdi, Musk gave me the blue tick by himself. So I never paid anything. Okay. Yeah, it was just given to me as a gift by Elon Musk.
Does it mean something to you?
No, well, it meant something when it was not being paid for, because now any Tom, Dick, and Harry can just pay and be verified. Before, it meant that you had a unique voice and a unique contribution to make, and that there should not be distortions and misrepresentations of what you represent. But now anybody can go there and call themselves Miguna Miguna, and they would have a blue tick.
Miguna Miguna, you are indeed a unique voice. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.